Well, here we are back again, and it is a beautiful day, and it looks as if it's going to stay that way for almost the entire day. Wow, what a difference. After Saturday's battering, here we are on a very, very decent morning, and it's likely to last through till tea time, according to the weather gurus. Now we're just waiting to see whether the system has worked, which it didn't. Um, for Philip Meredith earlier today. And we're going to join Harry Atterton in Normandy. Harry, a very worldwide traveller who settled in France and has made his name in restoring old castles. And Harry has travelled and lived and worked in many, many countries, and his experiences and his thoughts are very, very worthwhile listening to and sharing. So when he's along, I hope you'll tune in and give Harry an audience, as indeed I know you have from some of the figures. For the moment, let me just explain why we are all at sixes and sevens this morning. Those of you who are regular viewers will know that the headline story in the local paper, Sussex Express, is that an iconic hotel is to close its doors. Well, actually, not quite. It's been sold. And the Friday was the last day, or Saturday was the last day that its doors were open to the general public. The new owners are going to move in today, this morning, and I think that there will be a clear out of whatever furniture is left. So if you fancy buying a piece, rush down there now, or take a look at what is left, or if for some time you haven't been around, just making sure that we got through. Yes, Harry's got it. We haven't heard back from him, so I assume everything's all right, and we will we'll see him in a minute or two. The hotel is classic. It's somewhere around 1500. It was built as a private house, and then was turned into a hotel, a coaching inn, and has seen many, many interesting occasions there. So it behooves it to open its doors for one last time, not to house people and house Mirador for that matter, but to let people have one last look and see what is about to disappear. No, it's not going to disappear. It will become a restaurant and a small hotel. And that's going to take about 9 months to refurbish it to the use and the standard that the new owners want. And so we lose that hotel. And here is the man himself, as if by magic. Here we go. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning, Keith.
How are you?
I'm just fine. We've got a sunny day here in France, which is a relief after several days of heavy rain. And of course, the big storm Ciaran, which hit a little bit further down the coast from Normandy. It was mostly in Brittany and below, though the the western part of Normandy got a little bit of a battering. The Manche department, which is next door to us, we live in the Orne, and they got fairly badly hit, but not as badly hit, as I say, as Brittany and further south.
Well, we had a pretty bad time of it on Saturday, and of course it was the celebration of the hanging of Guy Fawkes that suffered most, I suppose. Although I didn't venture out when the storm is that fierce, it's more than I can face. But I could hear fireworks being let off in the distance, so I'm sure that many people enjoyed both the fireworks, the parade, and so on and so forth, despite getting thoroughly soaked.
Well, that's good news because sadly, there are headlines in French newspapers at the moment that the British police were attacked with fire bombs and petrol bombs and during the Guy Fawkes celebrations. Is that true, or is that an exaggeration by our French colleagues?
Well, it is the English papers are not reflecting that. There's nothing in the headlines to suggest it, but our colleagues, the two barristers, said that they had scoured the various news media and that there had been trouble in Scotland, of all places. But I will actually follow that up on that and see whether, in fact, they've been attacked by firebombs. If they have, I think it would be very, very localized. We don't normally have much trouble in Lewis with the bonfire. What happens, of course, is that the crowd size is dictated by the weather. On one occasion here in my time living here, when bonfire fell on a Saturday and there was a lovely evening, is the crowd swelled to 100,000 people. That's about 5 times the size of the population of the entire town. It wouldn't have been that high this year, but they did expect somewhere, even with the storms, about 30,000. But it is very, very, very organized in Lewis, and they have the police work with the bonfire societies, as they're called, who have their own fire marshals and who actually deal with troublemakers rather better than the police, because the police are a bit timid about cuffing anybody's ear now, not the fire marshals of the bonfire societies. You're causing trouble. Oi, mate, right, out.
Well, that's the other headline that we see in France, is that the British police are more than timid. They're standing back with all these demonstrations. They're not policing them as they should. But just before we get off the fireworks question, I seem to recall that there's a great fireworks celebration not far from you in Lewis at Newark.
Yes, there is.
Where they celebrate the martyrs, I believe, and they have a huge presentation there, and it's attended by, I don't know how many people, but certainly a lot of people go to that. I assisted at that, and not assisted, that's the French word. I was present for that celebration. Oh gosh, 10, 15 years ago, I think now.
Right. Well, the way the system works, actually, Harry, is that all the outlying villages, of which Newark would be one, have their own bonfire societies, and they each have their own celebrations, not necessarily on November the 5th, and that they then come together in Lewis to make this one massive celebration on Guy Fawkes night. Newark have got a good reputation for having a very good show. And I'm sure they did this year as well. But it is the final one is a joint effort. So if Newark, for instance, attracted say 20,000 people, they would bring more or less 20,000 people with them to add to the big crowd on the final night.
Well, it was very well organized on the occasion we were there, and one of the lovely little anecdote here is that there was a lady lost her wallet, and it was handed in intact to the police, and she got it back with no problem whatsoever. It was a badge, a feather in the cap of British honesty. There you
Yes.
go. Yeah.
Well, it is casting back to the year that I came to Lewis, which is 1990.
Mm.
Um, for the longest while, the bonfire societies had organised security and policing, as it were, themselves. And then there was a new council came into power, and they decided that this couldn't be left to amateurs, so it went back into the hands of the police. But they do work quite carefully together and have some rehearsals about how the marshals will operate. But what the bonfire societies do is they entirely look after the fire side of things. So they carry the torches, hundreds and hundreds of torches, which they prepare all year. And when they burn out, they just throw them down in the street. And then the fire marshals they come by with barrels and pick them up and clear it up. The remarkable thing is that you have bonfire with, as I say, up to 100,000, but let's say on average
Mm.
70 or 80,000 people, and they have this huge party with fireworks and torches and things thrown into the street. And when you go out the next morning, particularly on a Sunday when it's quiet anyway, the streets are pristine clean. And that's where the local council really does shine. It makes sure that the town is absolutely clear of any debris caused the night before. Quite astonishing.
It's quite impressive that, and you're talking about bonfire night. Guy Fawkes brings to mind a story that I may have mentioned to you before. That a little village not far from where we live, 5 or 10 kilometers at the most, is the village of Lucé. And there was a young man from Lucé who went to England. He signed up as a foot soldier with William the Conqueror in 1066, and he took part in the Battle of Hastings, and he acquitted himself honorably, and served King William well, and was rewarded with lands, and for further responsibilities, he was given more lands, and finally he built a beautiful castle. He was ennobled. He became a member of the Norman aristocracy that was ruling Britain at that time, and he built a castle near Stratford upon Avon. Now, I can't remember the name of the castle, but it was in that castle that Catesby and Fawkes and the rest of the conspirators met when they were planning to blow up the Parliament, the opening of Parliament, when James the First, and that's where the conspirators met, in this castle. So there's a very tenuous but a real historical link between where I live now and Guy
Yes.
Fawkes.
Any link is good enough, Harry.
Yes,
we need those sort of links.
of course. Yeah.
Just as a matter of interest, do you know how Guy Fawkes died?
I believe that he was what the French say, écartelé, hanged, drawn, and quartered. Was he not?
He was sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, which is a particularly nasty way to die.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, what he did was he broke free of the hangman and raced across the stage that the noose was on, and dived off it and broke his neck, rather than face the pain and horror of being hung, drawn, and quartered.
Oh well done. It reminds me of the story of the great highwayman. Was it who
Dick
was
Turpin?
it? Dick Turpin. Did he not do something similar when he was on the scaffolding? They put the rope around his neck, and he just pushed the hangman aside and ran off the deck, swinging above the crowd. He hanged himself effectively.
No, no, I didn't know that. So I shall add that to my historical knowledge, because we had a number of highwaymen in this part of the world, and eventually they were caught, and most of them were hanged at Newgate in London.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them were entertained the crowd when they were on the platform about to be hanged. They were sort of like stand-up comedians,
Yeah.
and it's quite remarkable. I think if I was facing being hanged, the last thing I'd want to do is to play funny man to a crowd howling to see my neck strung.
Well, it was an occasion for entertainment. I mean, apparently people turned out by the thousand to watch public hangings. It's a shame, really. It would have been more entertaining than some of the television programs that we get these days.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
One other little side issue, which perhaps you know and perhaps you don't, but a lot of people don't, so we can impart it to them, is that if we have a gala occasion, the word gala actually comes from gallows,
Oh,
and it
really?
was Gallows Day,
Mm-hmm.
because entertainment was indeed going to watch the hangings.
Mm-hmm.
So on Gallows Day, you went to the nearest hanging to be entertained, and that's how the word morphed into gala.
Oh my goodness! I've learned something this morning. I didn't know that.
Well, we're
Yeah.
sharing some knowledge now, but I think that sort of things that our viewers wouldn't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, we must keep these little gems for us on these programs.
Yes. So tell me, what's new in Britain at the moment? The life continues as always in France. We're still getting a number of our compatriots who decide to come and live here. In France. It's perhaps not as many as people think, mind you. There are only about 150,000 British people live permanently in France. Quite a number of others have second homes, but in terms of permanent residents, we're relatively small. Um,
Yes.
in terms of the British diaspora, the number of expats that have gone around the world, the last figure I saw was that at about 5 million or so Brits who live outside of England, and by far the largest majority is in Australia, and followed by the United States, I believe.
Wow.
And of course, Spain being a very popular destination, I think they have something like 300,000 Brits as permanent residents, 800,000 who have second homes there. Whereas France is quite a way down the scale at, as I say, at about 150, some say 170,000 Brits in France, which begs the question: why do Brits come and live in France? It's a great
Yeah,
country. It's
I think probably it's near that it's a way to get out of a country that you find a bit onerous for you. But let me ask you this, Harry. There's over 150,000. Do they tend to live in groups, or are they scattered right throughout the country?
well, living in groups. You mean grouping together and then becoming
Yeah.
an English ghetto in many ways?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, that is a problem. It's a problem of the language. Um, a good many people make an effort to learn French and therefore integrate more fully into French society. But there is a tendency for the Brits to collect in certain areas where they're really living in Little Britain,
Hmm.
and I don't think they fully experience the advantages of living here. It's a
Yes.
shame, really, because English being a universal language, they can get by most of the time.
Yes.
But to fully appreciate life here, it's essential that you learn the language.
The language and some of the customs, I would think. But many people, many analysts, ascribe some of our problems here to that very issue. Is that when people come from another country, they collect into ghettos. So, in other words, what they do is they live life as it was at home. They just happen to be in Britain. So the emotions are exacerbated by that, and that's why at the moment, for instance, we've got this issue with the Muslims getting overexcited about what's happening in Gaza, and massing and marching and so on, because they really feel that they are a home from home, rather than that they become English or British citizens.
Well, that's very true, and they have become British nationals in many cases, and of course, this is a very delicate subject because it borders on racism. But to what extent have they truly integrated into the British culture? And the answer is not a great deal. To be able to put hundreds of thousands of people on the streets espousing values which are alien to the British nation shows that they're not at all homogenized in terms of understanding or accepting the values and values of the nation of which they've become part.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it's very worrying. It's very worrying, and as I said, very delicate subject because um, isn't allowed to suggest at all that they're not fully
No, I mean,
deserving
do
nationality.
you have that problem in France that there are certain words and phrases you can't use in French anymore because they upset groups or minorities or whatever?
Oh, there are some, not as many as in Britain. It's not policed as much as it is in Britain by the woke brigade. There are certain words which are used in terms of immigrants, but it's usually just in bar conversation. It's not, you would never see these words used in the newspapers or any reference of that sort. So no, but what the problem in France, mind you, is going back to what you were talking about a few minutes ago, is the ghettoization of the immigrant population, and huge sections of major cities have been given over, and you would be very difficult to hear French spoken in them. And they become, if you add the overlay of the drug trade, they become no-go areas. There are reputedly 60 or more no-go areas in major French cities where even the police can't go under normal circumstances. They, in ones and twos, they'd have to go in force if they were to try to intervene in any affair, and then they would be stoned and chased out, and so there is a tremendous split in society which has happened, but mostly the big cities.
Yes. Well, I mean, that seems to be a global issue,
Hmm.
certainly for Western societies. It is similar here, and I have to say that once in a while you get a politician who is a bit fearless about these things. Our present Home Secretary is, I think she's of Indian origin. Uh,
Suella Braverman, yeah. Hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, she's quite outspoken about a number of things. And of
Hmm.
course, the liberal establishment dump on her. Oh, you can't say that. And all this woke group think she's evil and so on. I don't know whether she's a good Home Secretary or not. I haven't really studied it that carefully. But what I do know is I admire her for having the courage to use freedom of speech, for which we are so proud in this country, to express her views. And I go along with that because this is what this station does. We don't, I mean, we never said to you, Harry, don't say this and don't say that. And we don't say that to any of our correspondents, is that you're free to say exactly what you want as long as it's not obscene and it doesn't break copyright. Other than that, you're free to say what you want. But I mean, the BBC, for instance, got a whole handbook on what you can say and what you can't say, and which words are acceptable. And I find that totally negative, totally unhealthy to what we consider to be a free and democratic society.
Well, two subjects that you've raised there. One is the BBC, which is rapidly making itself a laughing stock across the world, particularly in France, I might point out. People just amazed at the stance that the BBC has taken. And the other one, of course, is the question of where does this all fit into the ability to talk about it? You're not allowed to talk about it. And Suella Braverman is, when you just listen to what she's saying, she's not saying a great deal. She's just trying to tell things as they are. But because the environment in which she's saying it has swung so much towards correct behavior, wokeism, and what have you, that she sounds as if she's being extreme. But no, that's the way people talk. That's the way the conversations happen every day in the street, in the shops, in the pub.
Yeah.
She's not saying anything other than what normal people say, but she's considered to be. Second, you open the mouth and say those things, they're considered an extreme right wing, which is ridiculous. So it means that the in the communication of information in Britain, it has become very much of a minefield, a no-go area, and somebody who tells the truth is considered guilty of all sorts of sins.
Absolutely, and that's all wrong.
Mhm.
Is even if you don't agree with what she's saying, is defend to the death her right to say it, and that's
Of
what we used
course.
to be proud of.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But it would be terrible if everybody agreed with everybody all the time. Society wouldn't advance. It's only by public debate that you can bring out issues and try and find a solution to common problems.
absolutely.
So I have
Absolutely.
great admiration for Suella Braverman, and but very few people in modern society speak up. And the problem being, of course, and from what I can see in France and Britain, there are very few people speaking up for the so-called silent majority.
Yeah,
When the referenda or polls and people are consulted, they give their opinions, but the politicians don't seem to follow that. They reflected perhaps more than ever in the United States, where the forgotten classes felt so abandoned that some guy like Trump comes along, who's a pretty scary individual in some ways, but he recognized that and harnessed that as a political force, and now he's got half the nation behind him because the do-gooders and the professional politicians weren't paying attention to what their constituents wanted. Uh,
exactly. Yeah,
so that's become his power base. I don't particularly like the guy, but I have to admit that he has become the people's representative. And in
yes.
a democracy, that's how it is. And if they elect him again, well, that's their choice. That's an American
Uh,
choice, and they
it,
have
it,
every right to do so. I'm not sure it would be a good thing, but at least it should get the mainstream politicians off their backsides and
yes.
learning to listen to what the people say and what they truly want.
I'm not so sure about the political classes anymore. Not at the moment, anyway. Harry, I saw Trump as exactly that. The electorate was so fed up with the Democrats and the Republicans, corruption and what's the word I want? Not patronizing, but giving jobs to friends and family and that sort
Of
of thing.
course, yeah. Hmm.
Yes, and I thought, gosh, here's a man who has put his hat into the ring, and I wonder if it'll teach the two major parties a lesson. Well, he lost for his second term. Did it teach them anything? No, they had as their candidate, an old style politician, and the man who became president was a really old style democratic
No,
man.
that's true.
Yeah,
It's
uh,
true
uh,
what you're saying. Mhm.
they learn nothing,
Yes.
and I mean, I think that some people say, "Hang on, there is a silent revolution going on." People begin to realise what's happening, and I think there may be a lot of truth in that. and I see that starting to be reflected in local politics. For instance, the Conservatives have ruled on a local basis, Lewis, for yonks, and there is not one single Conservative on it at the moment. They got turfed out. The trouble is that the lot that have come in have learned nothing, absolutely nothing. And all they're doing is they're aping and pretending that because they're green, that they are good guys. When in fact, everything they've touched so far, they've screwed up.
Well, politics have certainly been hijacked by the climate change movement. There's no question about it, and it's become a religion. But in terms of British politics, the way we see it from a distance, so we're not at all experts in it. We do see that the Conservative Party has not listened to the people, and it is governed in very much in a socialist fashion.
Indeed.
It has not been a Conservative Party at all. It had opportunity to do many things. If you take Brexit, the benefits of Brexit were never exploited. And so all the disadvantages of Brexit have come to the fore. We're still beholden to the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which is limiting, tied our hands behind our back. There are so many steps that could have been taken that haven't been taken because, again, the ruling party is not in contact with the people. They're not listening to the people. The Conservative rank and file elected Liz Truss as Prime Minister. She moved too quickly and in the right direction, but she moved too quickly, destabilized the markets, and we all know that story. But then who put Sunak and company in there? They were put in just by the cronyism within the Parliamentary Conservative Party. So even the leadership at the moment, Sunak may be a neat guy. I don't know him, but he certainly wasn't elected by the Conservative Party and by Conservative opinion. And he seems to be a steady hand at the helm, but it's taking Britain nowhere. And the frightful panoply of taxes that have been imposed by this Chancellor Hunt. I don't know what. Was he not a doctor, Hunt, or something? I'm not sure.
No, I'm not sure what he was, but certainly
I don't know where his financial skills come from. The highest taxations in 70 years, I believe. And where on earth do they get these ideas from? It's scary, and the ordinary punter like you and me has to live with that. So I assume that there's going to be a tremendous vote swing, not necessarily towards Labour in Britain, but away from the Conservatives. Labour will win, I guess, a big majority without getting any additional votes to what they normally get. It's just that people will stay home and not vote for the Conservatives. Why should they? And why should they? Yeah.
And in this climate, it does worry me. While Starmer is trying to show that he's middle of the road, is his number two undermines him all the time. I don't think that they say that she undermines him, but I mean she is a truly Corbynista and can't wait to apply some of the Corbyn type policies the moment the Conservatives are out of the way.
Well, yes, and I think we're going to see that. It's I believe we'll go through a few years of total upheaval. Maybe I won't live to see the end of it, but it's only by touching the bottom that will people realize that the problems they face and start to get themselves out of it.
Yes.
It has the same effects as a war. you have to build yourself back up again in order to conquer. And I think we're in for a bumpy road over the next 5 to 10 years. But again, going back to what you said a moment ago, will the politicians realize that there'll be a new range of politicians? I believe the Conservative Party could well disappear. The, the Labour Party, as we know it, is no longer the representative of the worker. It's more representative of new philosophies, new ideas, partly wokeism, climate change, all the rest of it, the new religions.
Harry, it's Liza has arrived. I'm just going to let her in. Don't hold that thought. Come up.
Door open.
Oops.
I was about to suggest that if one of these new parties, it may be Richard Tice, it may be something that Farage gets involved in again, but if they do, that will divide the so-called right of the political spectrum in Britain, and the Conservative Party. It's had full sway since 1832. It's probably time for a major clean out. They may become a thing of the past, like the Whigs, and
yes, indeed,
disappeared off the political spectrum. I suspect we're in for some very, very major political change in Britain, and for that in France as well.
Yes, and maybe it's no bad thing, Harry, in as much as there are big social changes too, and perhaps the parliaments have got to start to reflect what is truly the people rather than what they've always believed it to be.
Well, yes, indeed, but the question then becomes, and again takes us back to earlier in the conversation, of who are the people now? Are there the hundreds of thousands parading in favor of terrorism, or are there the average British person staying at home and watching that on television and thinking the world is going to hell in a handbasket? I mean, and people of our age who were inculcated with the values of a different period, of a different era, we find that very difficult to understand. But are we out of touch? Society in constant turmoil? Is it in constant change?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're out of touch, Harry, and I think that there is a considerable chunk of the population that think like us, but perhaps we've got to accept that those people that aren't like us are a bit different. It isn't the old Labour Conservative division. There's a sort of in the middle there is a mixture of what used to be represented by the Liberals, but the Liberals are going nowhere. So obviously that mixture in the middle isn't what it was. I think that, I mean, you're right, we have no idea where it's going to go. But I also don't think that it's an area that is necessarily populated by the 100,000 that march and are threatening the cenotaph. I think that there is major change in a good segment. I mean, nobody keeps their coal in the bath anymore.
Well, there's no great division now, I don't think, between the Conservatives and the Socialists. They seem to be reactive rather than proactive in both cases, and they're just going to go whichever way the wind takes them in favor of their own political interests.
Indeed.
So there wouldn't be a lot of difference when I was going to say if, but more when the Labour Party forms the new government. one cannot imagine major change, certainly not from a financial point of view, because the money isn't there. They can't raise the taxes anymore, and Britain is indebted to such a degree that if they continued borrowing, it'll just put the economy into a hole. I don't think we're going to see any major change then. What we will see is philosophical change, and the voices of these protesters will be more readily heard because that is part of their constituency. And and since the infrastructure of British of the British administration, anything from the Metropolitan Police to BBC for that matter, are going to be supportive of that change.
Yes.
It's Britain that is changing massively. It's not, and it's the political parties the leading political parties are just being pulled along with it, almost not against their will, is because they subordinate themselves to these popular movements.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I
there is no
argue
strong
that
leader,
what
strong
we're
leader
really
on the
lacking,
horizon.
yeah, what we're really lacking is leadership, and just on this
Mm,
level, the late Stephen Catlin here, who's a
mm,
good friend of mine. In fact, he lives right next door to me. He died sadly about 2 or 3 months ago, but he was mayor. He became mayor. And he said to me, you know, Keith, he said, why am I bothering to be mayor? Because the political parties are in a complete mess. And I said,
mm,
well, actually, Stephen, what you do, and he did do, was show leadership. And
mhm,
that's what's required at the moment, people who
mhm,
are prepared to be leaders.
mhm.
And I don't think that's why I'm fond of Suella Braverman. It looks as if she's got some element of leadership in her.
Yes, well, she certainly has the courage to express her ideas. But if we were to stand back and I'd like to share a question with you. Who do you see, and in Britain, you're closer to it than I am. Who do you see in Britain as being capable of encapsulating the necessary thought to put Britain back on track? Um, we, um, uh, we there are one or two politicians in there that seem to have the potential. Kemi Badenoch being one of them. Do you see anybody who is likely to come out of this political explosion and lead the nation back onto the right path, or are we totally devoid of leadership? Is there a dearth of leadership at the moment?
I think it's a dearth of leadership, but also normally I would be able to answer your question with sort of saying, you know, A or B. I can't. I
Mm,
don't see any semblance of leadership at all.
mhm,
Even the present prime minister is when he was chancellor. We looked very carefully at his first budget, and I said to my colleague, who was an ex-business graduate, I said, you know, he is long on words, but very short on anything that isn't spin. And I've been proved right.
mhm,
And I think that is at the moment what we might call the elite are in the ascendant in terms of politics. And I actually classify the elite as being having come from a good public school or a good grammar school like you and I, capable of debate, but not much on action or leadership.
mhm.
And I still think that Eton and Harrow and possibly one or two more schools are turning out the politicians, and they are good talkers. I've often said is that the person that I don't really like interviewing on television is a politician because he can make black seem white and upside down seem the right way up. And he does it so skillfully and carefully is that all the good arguments that you'd got in terms of sitting down and talking to him is go out of the window.
Of course.
That's the problem, I think, with politics at the moment.
Well, that's the art of politics, is to be able to speak for half an hour and say nothing.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
they're all very good at that, but I don't know
Mm.
that it's now remained the art of politics.
Yes, yes. But let me ask you a question here. Um, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak um, um, is saying that he doesn't think it's a good thing that the protest should be happening on Remembrance Day. And he was saying that he thought it would be rather nice if the head of the Metropolitan Police considered possibly doing something about it.
Yeah.
Well, who's in charge?
Exactly,
Who's in
exactly.
charge? I mean, this is absolute rubbish. I
Yeah,
mean,
the,
the
yeah.
the mayor of London, who has considerably less power than the prime minister, got rid of the previous head of the Metropolitan Police. Some poor girl, I forget her name now.
Yeah, yeah,
The prime minister is pleading that this public servant it should be made quite clear and not in a dictatorial fashion, but simply saying either you apply the laws of the land, which are fully adequate to prevent this potential disaster, apply the laws of the land, or we'll look for somebody else to do it.
yes.
But it's not. It's not. He hasn't. He hasn't. He hasn't got the remotest leadership skills. And don't talk about Starmer or any of these others. I mean, they would go and hide in the closet if the
Well,
conservative socialists put them all in the same bag, throw them in the ocean.
I do a certain amount of training in what a constitutional monarchy is. And you know, listening to that, which was widely reported this morning, of course, is he got me thinking. Is hang on, you know, is this a part of a constitutional monarchy? Does the police chief have that sort of power? The answer is, after I mulled it over, is no, he does not. And
Well,
once a lobby correspondent friend of mine said to me, you know, the House of Commons is the supreme authority. It has supreme power. Everything comes out of the House of Commons, and yet it's not anymore. Is the authority is being thrown around like confetti, and that's one of the things that is frightening, I think.
mm. Well, I think Britain generally, and to a large degree, the Western system is run by semi-government agencies, either by the deep state, the civil service, the and these what do you call these quangos that have been
Yes.
given too much independence and power, and they determine and to move into just ordinary everyday subjects like house building, which Britain desperately needs.
Yes.
There are so many government funded organizations that fight the government's policy to build houses for the people.
Yeah.
And yet we continue to fund these organizations with millions and millions of pounds, which we ain't got because we're borrowing them every day,
Yes.
every week, every month, every year. And so it just seems like the system is broken to me. Um,
I keep a little picture of a dog, the rear end of a dog, showing its tail,
mhm.
because I think that this all starts with the politics in Parliament. It started with Theresa May, where
Mhm.
she permitted the backbenchers to virtually rule the country,
No,
and
don't go
it was
on.
the tail was wagging the dog, and we
Absolutely.
haven't come back from that.
Hmm. Well, from my perspective, and we're getting into deep water here because neither of us are qualified to. We're neither of us are expert in this matter, but we're just expressing our personal feelings, which people may or may not agree with, and they have every right to disagree with what we're saying. But
But we have every right to say it, Harry, and that's the important thing, which
Ther- Ther-
is people are
Theresa,
fighting, and that's
Theresa May was a disaster.
yeah,
That she didn't lead; she was led. and Cameron not so much better. And
No,
and uh,
that's right.
and,
That's
and
right.
so no, what we want is a strong leader, not a dictator, just somebody who will apply the laws of the land and lead the nation forward. And that sort of person, I keep coming back to Kemi Badenoch. She seems to be coming across to me as having that kind of character. She's a
You're not the
latent.
first person to mention that name to me. I haven't watched her closely enough, but I will now begin to start to look at the names that might make a good leader, I'll collect some facts and figures on them so we can have another damn good go at it next week.
Well, I wonder if I have to, ask myself the question: Are we overstepping the mark? Is you and I talk about this as if we're sitting in the pub chatting about it, and we're uh, being listened to by millions of viewers, I'm sure, at least two or three people, and the so to actually not impose our ideas, but to express our ideas forcefully. We don't have any divine right to do that.
No, but there is no divine right that says that we can't. And if in fact people don't want us to, if the government doesn't want us to, or then they have the power to legislate and say no. But thank God they have not. And I think that we voice some thoughts and ideas that many people, as you say, are too timid to voice.
Well, this is true, and what we need to find out is how the people basically think, and they need to express themselves. That's democracy. We don't want anybody, as I said, we don't want a dictator kind of person, but we want some people who reflects the will of the people, and once he knows what the people want, goes out and does it.
Absolutely.
Um, and whether
Well,
puts.
the next guest, or next correspondent, Eliza Page, is very outspoken about her beliefs, and believe me, slowly what she's finding is that more and more people are saying to her, Eliza, is what you say has
Mhm.
a large measure of importance. I won't
Sure.
say truth, because truth is a funny word, but and I like to think that one way or another, from the barristers in the morning through to Liza towards lunch, is that we have a theme, and that is that we express those views that people are becoming too timid to express in our society. The only
Mhm.
thing is, Harry, just be careful when you walk out of your house, just in case there's somebody who doesn't like what you said.
Oh, well, we've all got to go sometime. Yeah, it's going to be sooner rather than later, I fear, for both of us. But the I it but I think it's high time people stood up and we had a few marches in the streets of people who espouse our values. If
Absolutely.
those people exist, and I'm sure they do, I'm sure
Yes.
there's a hidden majority that is horrified by what we're seeing on television, and above all, biased television like BBC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that and they must be very uneasy at seeing that. And it's not just older people like us. I'm sure that they're younger people because they're the ones that embody the hope for the future.
That's right.
And and
They are going to inherit the earth, and
a lot of bright young people out there. As long as they haven't been to university where they become tainted with all these strange ideas, we should, I think it would probably first initial move would be to close the universities
start over again.
and
Yeah.
get people who actually work for a living to express their views and determine collectively how we want to move forward.
Lord, I couldn't agree more. We'll continue this next week, Harry. Uh,
Okay.
it's refreshing to be able to have these sort of chats.
Well,
Uh,
next week, of course, Keith, we've got this young lady from the tourist office here.
so we have.
And
Well,
today I had in mind to talk about life in France
yes,
and the
that's great.
benefits, a positive debate, and why Brits come to live in France, or for that matter, why they go to live elsewhere. One of the simple reasons, of course, is that Britain is crowded and there's far more floor space in. There's 4 times as much floor space as in France.
Yes, you don't have to cut down
That's
a
what
tree
I
to
intend
accommodate
to
someone.
talk about today, and I think we've perhaps got into a little bit dangerous waters. But then again, it's got to be said,
Absolutely.
and
Let's get into dangerous waters.
I'm sure you'll get
Right.
reaction to our comments.
Well, hopefully, Harry, this time next year we'll still be doing this program, so there's plenty of time in between. I doubt if conditions are going to change overnight, so that this conversation becomes useless. So we'll pick up the week after next, and we look forward to seeing your young lady next
Next week, yes, and we'll talk about tourism.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
Good show. Well, keep up the good work, Keith.
And actually, it was a
Are
good
you
show.
you're in a new home now? Are you? You got you
No, we're changing studio, so this is just temporary on the way
I'm
through.
still in the hotel at the moment. Then.
No, we're in my apartment this morning because we can't move into the new place for a week, and the hotel shut on Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that change, and hope it all works out well.
Thank
And
you.
look forward to seeing you next Monday.
Right, you are.
Okay, Keith.
Yes.
Bless
Bye,
you.
Harry.
Bye. Bye.